I'm Pia de Solenni. I am the Executive Director and President of the Global Institute of Church Management. It's great to welcome you back for our second webinar series, Managing the Assets of the Church. This series is going to be a little bit different than what we've had before. I'm excited. I think I've really been motivated by the capstone projects of our students in Rome, and it brought to light how many opportunities there are in the area of assets. And for this first part of the series, we've extended an invitation to Notre Dame, and we're joined by their Fitzgerald Institute for Real Estate as a collaborator to plan out these webinars. So the first few are going to touch on the topic of real estate, because real estate, the church is collectively the largest landowner in the world. Doesn't act like it at times, but it is. And so these are tremendous assets that we want to just discuss. How do we, so often we see them as liabilities rather than assets. And so that will be the focus of our conversation. Today, we're going to be talking about real estate and innovation. Next time, we'll be talking about the topic of rural real estate, then urban, and then finally kind of legal legacy, how you protect things in December. And really all of this is a lead up to a conference that we're very excited to be hosting with FIRE, with the Fitzgerald Institute in Rome, February 7th through 9th, talking about specifically managing real estate, the church managing real estate, turning assets into liability. And we believe that there's a cross section here between property and evangelization, that these are not merely worldly concerns, but these, and as you know, here for Global Institute, our motto is that we're teaching students, particularly through the program of church management and our flagship program in Rome, how to best steward the assets of the church for the salvation of souls. Because the church has these material assets, they're here for a reason. So we want to be able to, steward them they're here for the salvation, for the sake of souls. And what's interesting is that as we've dug into this, sometimes we're talking about, what do you do with 400 acres in Kenya that belongs to a diocese? And we found out that a parking lot in Colorado can serve the church's mission. And so it's a very creative and exciting topic, and I'm really glad that you joined us for it. As always, we welcome your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. If you have suggestions, please contact us on our website, gicm.org. We are about ready to start our fifth cohort in Rome with the program of church management. The intensives start on September 20th. So I will be there for the start for those 2 weeks. And these are our first intensives since the pandemic started. So we actually began the pandemic with intensives, and hopefully this is coming to a close, God willing. So I want to turn quickly to our panelists today. We have Jeff Rauenhorst from Mission Energy, and Jeff is the Executive Vice President of Asset Management. We're joined by David Murphy from the Fitzgerald Institute of Real Estate at Notre Dame. He is the Program Director for Church Properties. And finally, Solène Tadié, who is the European Correspondent from the Register. And Solène's work has been really interesting. We tripped across it, and David and I were messaging each other, and we each had like 15 tabs open because she had all these tremendous articles that were precisely focused on this creative use of the church's resources. So with that, I just want to give you a quick guide. We'll do about 40 minutes of conversation, and then we'll move to 15 minutes of Q&A. So you'll notice at the bottom of your screen, there's chat. Feel free to jump in there and just say hello. And let us know where you're from. I saw from the registrations, we have people from all over the world. We have some bishops and archbishops. We have heads of congregations. We have priests, lay people, religious. So feel free in the chat just to jump in, let us know where you're from. It's great to hear from you. Then there's also, if you go over on my screen, it's the far right, you'll see a Q&A tab. And that's where you can submit your questions. And then we will do our best to answer those questions during that last 15 minutes. So without further ado, if I can turn to Jeff. And Jeff, if you can tell us a little bit about how the Mission Energy was started. You responded to the Pope Francis's call in Laudato Si. And maybe if you could just give us an example, like one of your best case studies.
Sure, happy to. Thank you, Pia, and thank you everybody for joining us here today. I'm coming to you from smoky Lake Tahoe, Nevada here. So it's a little confusing. So first, let me start. There's a group called the Catholic Climate Covenant, a nonprofit that really inspires and equips people and institutions to care for creation and care for the poor. It's really through a partnership of 19 national organizations that it guides the US Church's response to climate change by educating, giving public witness, and offering resources. With the release of Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si in 2015, they were inspired to really take more concrete action. And with that, they created the Catholic Energies program. To date, this program has either completed or is building 26 solar and energy efficiency projects in 11 states across the US. So I work for Mission Energy, a for-profit company that runs the Catholic Energy program for the Catholic Climate Covenant. So what is the Catholic Energies program? We are a turnkey program to identify, finance, and install solar and energy efficiency projects. This drives down energy costs for Catholic organizations, so more resources can be directed to mission-aligned activities, and so the organization can be a witness to the change that Pope Francis calls for. We know that most Catholic organizations lack the time, money, and expertise to implement solar projects. So we act as an owner's representative to assess if solar is right for an organization and where, on a rooftop, on a parking lot, in a field. Then we help find financing partners, we vet and hire contractors, and we oversee the construction. Through innovative financing mechanisms, we provide these projects at no cost to the Catholic organization and deliver savings from day one. Sometimes we are even able to finance deferred maintenance and capital projects, such as roof replacements. And these financial savings on your utility bill can allow a school to fund a new scholarship or a parish to hire that long desired youth minister. So even more, these solar projects can be a witness to parishioners and the community, especially young Catholics, that the church practices what it preaches. Catholics of all ages can encounter a church that is living out Laudato Si, and the community sees a church asset that evangelizes the good news. We continue to innovate. To date, we have worked with financing partners to fund our projects. We are beginning to raise capital from Catholic impact investors to build our own Catholic solar assets, completing a virtuous circle. And I'll highlight one project amongst the many that we've done. Was one of our first. It was with Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. This was a large solar project that was 2 megawatts and covered 5 acres of land in the district. What I love about this project is it was a great collaboration. First, the land was owned by Mother Teresa's Missionaries Charity Sisters that had a convent and nursing home. And they were struggling with repair and maintenance costs. So they partnered with Catholic Charities. So the solar array was actually on their land, and it provided a lease of that land for $200,000 a year that can be used to maintain the facility and even take care of, the mundane issues of church management, such as mowing the yard was included in the contract. For Catholic Charities, it offset 12 properties in the DC area, all the energy usage for 12 properties. And any extra power that was generated, Catholic Charities could donate to families in need. And this energy savings delivered over $250,000 of savings for Catholic Charities, which it could then in turn invest back into the community through its services. So, the DC is a very rich market for solar. So this is a little unique, but it can show where, one solar project can benefit a lot of communities. And even the local community where we planted pollinator meadows underneath the solar plants so they can pollinate, the local plants. So many other projects I'm happy to talk about. But
quick question, Jeff. Does Pope Francis know about your work?
I hope so, but I'm not exactly sure.
All right. Listen, I'm going to turn to David Murphy. So David's work in church property actually started here in San Diego. David is the program director of church properties at the Fitzgerald Institute for Real Estate at Notre Dame. And while he was here in San Diego, he discovered an opportunity. So, excuse me, David, I'll turn it over to you. If you can tell us a little bit about how you stumbled into this project and highlight one of your favorite projects. My favorite project is actually your San Diego project, but you know, I'm partial.
Yes, well, thank you so much, Pia. It's great to be with you all. I was stationed in San Diego as a helicopter pilot for the Navy after graduating from Notre Dame. And when I was out there, stumbled upon, there was a huge convent in a very affluent neighborhood with 15 bedrooms that the sisters from Ireland used to live in. And the last 3 moved back to Ireland and leaving this beautiful property vacant and open. And it was there that kind of a light bulb moment went on between myself and some other friends of saying, gosh, you know, wouldn't it be great if this could be used for something other than just sitting empty? You know, we don't pay property tax on it. And in discussions with the pastor, he said, oh, this is our rainy day fund. So in the future, if we need a new roof or an expansion, we can sell this. And this is kind of our ace in the hole. And I said, okay, well, you know, is there an opportunity to house young adult professionals, teachers? You know, there's no shortage of people in Southern California who need affordable housing. And this seemed like a great opportunity to do it. It was in an awesome neighborhood. And so through a series of kind of trial and error of bringing proposals to the parish pastor, well, there's insurance to figure out or liability or who's going to manage it, you know, a property manager. Those are not things that the church typically does at the parish level. And so we ended up saying, well, hey, what if we just created a nonprofit that could activate these properties for young adult Catholic professionals? So young adults can get a intentional community, so they can live together with other Catholics in an area. They can have, oftentimes these convents and rectories have a chapel in them. So what better way than to, you know, gather around and have community prayer? Just, you know, if it's late at night after a long work day, you can just hop down into the chapel and pray, and wouldn't that be awesome, you know, and create these intentional communities. And as a benefit, the young adults could be able to pay a discounted rent, but that would be an organic revenue stream for the parish. And just like Jeff said, it was one of these great connecting the dots of, hey, there's deferred maintenance, or there's a position that you really want to switch from part-time or hourly to salaried to really attract top talent so that the parish life is deepened. And oftentimes it's the equation is that, well, we have this really, you know, great land rich opportunity, but we're cash poor. And is there a way to kind of break that mentality through the assets that we already own? So my nonprofit that I was involved with is called Quo Vadis, which is Latin for where are you going? And so it's a question both for the church, you know, where are we going with young adults with this property, and also for the young adults. So in life, as you discern, you just graduated, where are we going? So the opportunity was there. We started in San Diego initially with a property that we kind of got a hold of through another nonprofit. So that was our beta test. And then we have 2 houses here in South Bend. We have a total of 10 young adults living here in South Bend in 2 separate areas. So one of them is in a 100-year-old rectory, and one of them is in a 65-year-old convent. Both were empty and fallow. And it was really exciting to have that first person move in just this past January and breathe new life into these buildings. So we were able to hire parishioners to do the work. So we paid them market rate, and it was not a handout or anything that we asked for. And then now those 2 properties are generating $50,000 a year combined of tax-free income for the church that's being immediately distributed back to both deferred maintenance, but also scholarships for underprivileged children in the community who wouldn't be able to attend the Catholic school. So it's kind of creating organic revenue stream, but what we're really excited about is the spiritual and social capital that's generated when you have 10 young adults showing up to Mass, participating, the QV fellows, as they're called, give 3 to 5 hours of service back to the parish a week. They have a shared meal together every week. They pray together every week. And so there's a service component, and there's kind of a vibrancy that they inject back into the community, whether it's, we have a guy coaching the middle school track team. We have all sorts of different initiatives of, we have a concert organist who's living in there and he's tearing up the organ on Sundays. So it's really great to see a parish community that wants young adults and young adults who want to be in the parish, and bringing those together in a win across the spectrum. And it was through that kind of light bulb moment back in sunny San Diego that eventually led me to my position here at Notre Dame, where the Fitzgerald Institute for Real Estate is looking at globally kind of the broader macro level church property issues. So anything from adaptive reuse of convents and rectories to parking lots, to the environmental stewardship aspect, to complex sale leaseback or 99-year lease contracts that we're able to help empower the church with this knowledge to provide them kind of an added playbook of best practices of whatever their ministerial needs are and whatever their real estate assets are.
And David, one of the things that I loved when you told me about the San Diego story, again, we're going to go back to my little fixation here, was that, suddenly you had young professionals that were teaching the confirmation class. And so it was somebody that's a little more relatable to the people that are preparing for confirmation. And you also mentioned that a group of young men show up at Mass, a group of young women start showing up at Mass. And also it's a point of encounter that you invite a friend over. If you're living in one of these residences, you invite a friend over for a beer or whatever, a barbecue, and they say, wait, you live next to a church. What's that about? So what I like about these projects is that they're also able to really to go deeper into Pope Francis's call for encounter, facilitating that space. And before I go down that hole, I want to turn to Solène. Solène has, again, been doing tremendous reporting on this, mostly on situations in France and in Italy. And Solène, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about one of your favorite cases. You mentioned a case with the Cistercian nuns, if I'm not,
that's correct.
I've got it right. Could you tell us a little bit about what was the project? What was the impact?
Absolutely, because yes, I've been reporting on this situation for months because I believe it is a very, very serious issue. I mean, there are some buildings that are disappearing everywhere, but there are great initiatives at the same time. So this initiative you were mentioning is a very ambitious project. It is at the Abbey of Boulogne in southwestern France. It's a €4 million rebuilding plan for an ancient Fontevraud Priory, a 12th century building that is being restored by the nuns. They're a Cistercian community. So it is a very ambitious project, and it is basically the reproduction of an ancient monastic grange, which is something totally specific of the Middle Age. So the nuns basically take care of their whole production chain using the resources of their big property. They have their properties like something like 100 acres. So from fruit trees to cows, outdoor reared pigs. So they do everything. And so the very good thing is that they are helping people around because they are becoming an attractive economic hub and cultural and touristic hub. So it's helping the whole region, because this region of the south of France is poor right now, and it's getting poorer and poorer. And it's going to help a lot of people. It's bringing a significant benefit since, and it's going to increase in the coming years because, of course, they develop a lot of projects. They also employ local businesses only to do the work part, so and they help people around who cannot live in city centers because they can provide. They have a shop, so they help people around. So it's something that can change people's life, and this is what it used to be in the Middle Age, and it's becoming just like it used to be. It's a lovely model. Also, at a time when we are looking for great female models for the church, they represent the kind in a certain way the boldness of a whole all-female entrepreneurship. So it's very inspiring for people around the world. They told me that they are attracting people from across the planet during the summer. They come from the US, from around the world to help with the restoration work. because they love it. You know, it evokes this image of the 12th century abbesses that used to go horseback, visit their lands, which was commonplace at that time of the history. So it's very inspiring, and it's a very great message, I believe. But there are other initiatives like that that are inspiring people around across Europe, specifically because we have a lot of beautiful ancient monasteries, and we are able to resume a lot of activities. I reported a lot about the wonderful wine initiative at Le Barou, you know, because the monastic renewal that we know today in Europe started at Le Barou in southeastern France this time. You know, the rehabilitation of the first papal vineyard. So it's called Via Caritatis. So you can find the wine in the US, you can buy that in the US. And it's basically a very ancient vineyard started by Pope Clement V in the 14th century, and they resumed it now, you know, and so it's a wonderful symbol of what we can do, how we can use what we have, the heritage that the church left us, not to destroy it, not to use it for secular purposes, but to great things. And they are helping wine growers in the whole region that couldn't no longer live from their work. And now they are offering their expertise in the wine sector to help the wine growers stay on their lands with their family. And they are extremely successful. They're already winning a lot of prizes in the south of France. They are doing great products. So it's Via Caritatis if some of you are interested in these initiatives. But I think it's very important for us to highlight these kind of initiatives because it shows what we are actually able to do with all of these buildings that we have. Not everything is negative, you know, we have, yes, bad news, buildings are disappearing, but at the same time, there are a lot that we can do. People across Europe are very inspired by that, in the US as well. And I think we should discuss that even more.
Thank you, Solène. I just want to open it up to our panelists. You know, if feel free to jump in. I mean, I just think that these are just such profound stories, again, of encounter, of evangelization, where we're generating revenue, but we're also presenting a place of encounter for the church. I remember my work when I was chancellor of the Diocese of Orange. We would host, you know, a movie screening or a lecture, and I would meet people who would come on campus. I don't know how they got the invite, all right, but somehow they heard about it, they came, and they would talk to me afterwards, and they'd say, wow, this is great. I had no idea there was a Catholic church here. I haven't been to church in 20 years, 30 years. I guess I'll come back. And I thought, oh my gosh, we're working on, you know, we're all talking about programs and efforts and campaigns. How do we get people to come back to church? And sometimes we just have to let them know that we're there, and they have to be invited into that space. And just, you know, wondering if any of the panelists would like to jump in based on your experience. You know, this is tremendous. We're using these assets, we're raising revenue for the church, but then this aspect of encounter and evangelization.
And another very important aspect is that we are actually able to help people around, which is, you know, like it used to be. It is the purpose of the church as well, to speak about eternal life, but as well to bring, like, you know, to help people, to help the poor. And this is what we are precisely doing through these initiatives, because through the initiatives we can help poor regions, and it can happen anywhere, you know, anywhere in the world. We can take inspiration from these initiatives and do that in the US, do that in Africa, anywhere. As long as we know how to build things, as long as we have a good let's say, like the right teachings from the church, and we have the skills, these monastic skills that are unique. No one else has it. So, you know, it's and it is the case as well for so many other examples. In Italy, and a lot of people in Europe are resuming their you know, their brewing activity. They are doing their beer again, because many of in Belgium and other places, they used to stop doing the beer themselves, but they resume that for economic reasons most of the time. But it actually helps people around, and it's a great opportunity for them to bring the gospel to people again, you know, through beauty, through goodness, through food, and it gives people a glimpse of eternity as well. So that's why I love to report on that, and I think everyone should report more about these topics.
Yeah, Pia, we saw that, when you have young adults just living in a community, the opportunity for encounter in kind of a non-specifically church space, in a sense of, oh, hey, there's maybe an ask to go to mass or confession or an adoration night. And if people have been on the periphery and kind of away from the church, or there's a lot of things spoken about the church, and the church doesn't often do a great job of telling its own story of what we stand for and who we are. And so to provide a very low risk opportunity to say, hey, come over. And I remember there was an opportunity in San Diego that said, hey, let's just come over and watch the Super Bowl. People said, oh yeah, that sounds great. Where are you? And we said, oh, we're at Our Lady of Perpetual Help. And people said, what? Is this some sort of like weird covert thing to get us into church? And I said, no, it's at a house next door, and it was at a former school. So there's a football field. There's basketball courts. And so people were able to be outside, drinking a beer, having fun, and playing football, shooting hoops. And people showed up and said, oh, wow, okay. But it was an opportunity for those encounters and those kind of meaningful collisions to happen where, yeah, you're playing hoops. But then it comes up and says, yeah, what parish do you go to, or what mass do you go to here? And it was so funny just seeing, once you have that critical mass, even within the parish, there's people who are going to the 10 o'clock mass, and there's people who are going to the 8:30 mass who didn't even know they existed, because there was kind of no central gathering point. And all of a sudden you're able to say, oh my gosh, like we should go to the same mass together, or let's get breakfast after. So you create these kind of relationships and these friendships where I love the quote from Augustine of ever ancient, ever new, of it just goes right back to the earliest Christian communities, where it wasn't doctrinal. It wasn't based on, oh, like, do you have good music, or is there beautiful architecture? It was simply just relational. It was, the road to Emmaus. It was a friend kind of witnessing to another friend of, hey, my life's different because of Christ. And I want to invite you into that. And so it's funny, because at the end of the day, real estate and this whole conversation, plays that role of, we take all of our faith that's very intangible, and it materializes in a parish or a convent or a rectory, and we're able to kind of live out and encounter to others, witness to others, our faith in those sacred spaces. And so there's definitely those opportunities for deepening the faith of those who are already in the parish community, who maybe feel aloof or outside of the normal critical mass, but then also going out and witnessing, the neighbors driving by, saying like, who are all these guys, playing football and having fun, and you want to get to know them. And so there's an outreach component, whether they're Catholic or not, of, hey, we're here and we're living intentionally and in a different way than maybe culture would have us live. And those are, we don't have great data. It's just been a couple of years since we started, but hopefully those seeds are planted, and the faith can be renewed in those small ways and those small encounters.
I'll mention a quick story of the Diocese of Richmond, Virginia. We were talking to the bishop and kind of put out and did a webinar for all the parishes in the diocese. And Immaculate Conception Parish in Hampton, Virginia, really took the first step of installing solar on their church. And Father John Grace led that effort. He's now known as Father Sunshine in his community. But what we saw is, with this first step in this first parish, we've seen this cascading effect within the Diocese of Richmond. Well, he was the first. We've seen now we have 10 parishes and diocese buildings that have either installed or are installing solar, and that number continues to grow. So that's really an encounter for the local parishioners. But Father John, he talks a lot about how this isn't just about saving money. He talks about it as an outward sign of hope, and he's quoted as saying that parishioners are now excited to take on more hope restoring projects like carbon offsets with African farmers. Hope is not a one-off. It multiplies. And we see that multiplying effect within the Diocese of Richmond.
Jeff, I want to ask you a question. actually, because we're already getting some questions both in chat and in Q&A. So if people can, again, put the questions in the Q&A, but here's just a case study, an impromptu case study for all of us here. So we have Maria from Zambia in South Africa, and she is saying they've bought property, but now they lack the resources, that now they need money to invest in the property, and they want to be able to farm it. So I'm still waiting for more details, but with those rough details, is there anyone on the panel that wants to give some suggestions? Jeff, if they were going to look at solar, how does that even begin to get financed? Because that's the thing, is that,
yeah.
you know, it's one thing if you have resources to invest in a piece of property, but what do you do in the situation where there are very limited resources, which is what the church is facing in many parts of the world?
Mm-hmm. So I think the general answer across the globe is partnership, and finding partnership with resources that have the capital. You know, I know more about the U.S. than I do about the rest of the country, but the work we do here in the U.S., you know, we partner with financial resources to help pay for these projects. You know, the interesting part of solar is it's a very stable recurring revenue. The technology has been proven for a long time, so investors are willing to say, you know, I'd be willing to spend the money to install the system, knowing that I can receive some of the revenue from those projects, you know, in terms of what you pay for energy over the 25, 30-year lifetime of the project. So, yeah, unfortunately, I don't know specifics about Romania or lots of places in different places in Africa. However, you know, I think that's the opportunity is to find that partnership. I know here in the U.S., we're also trying to begin to raise Catholic capital, specifically from Catholic individual investors, from foundations, from Catholic organizations that can receive a return from these projects. So but it's not easy. It's finding the right projects. You know, even banks in the U.S. for sure are much more comfortable loaning to solar and renewable energy assets. I would expect that places around the world also have similar financial partners they can find.
And I mean, this is a question for all the panelists. What about, again, turning to this topic of investors and financing, what are some creative ways to find financing or investors at a local level? Have you come across this in your work? And again, to all the panelists, because I think it can mean a lot to be able to, it means a lot, I think, to be able to include the local community wherever possible.
I'll give a quick example. I apologize, this is again US centric, but crowdfunding, where you raise capital, small amounts of capital from larger groups of people, is becoming more and more popular in the US. And we haven't done it yet, but we plan on being able to say a parish in you know, New Jersey that would like to put solar on their roof, on their church roof. The parishioners could actually be the investors in that project and help fund it, and they receive a return from it. So that is one growing area that I see an opportunity to really engage the community to fund projects like this.
So that would be the individual parishioners are receiving something, or the parish is receiving the. So
the individual investors would invest $50, $500, $5,000 into a project for your church. And then the church would receive, in the case of, say, a solar system, the church would receive the benefit of lower energy costs, and the individual parishioners would receive a small return on their investments.
That's great. Anyone else?
Yeah, one thing too that I found super helpful, and Jeff mentioned partnerships. So I had no experience in real estate, and it was kind of through reaching out to people like Fitzgerald for Real Estate here at Notre Dame, but also partners like GICM, where there are people who can, oftentimes there might be, for example, with Maria in Africa, there might be the land there and they say, oh, well, we want to do farming. One thing that I found super helpful was having people press me on, well, okay, you have this convent, but what's the vision? How do you make this sustainable? And it's not simply just, oh, like, can I have, I was like, well, if I had more money, it would just solve all my problems. I could just do things. But kind of going through that process to tease out, well, okay, if you want to do farming, is the soil even suitable for farming? What kind of farming? And at first it sounds kind of like very deflating, of saying, well, I have this great idea, like, why are you kind of pressing back on me and asking these questions? But it was so important of kind of refining and teasing out what exactly we wanted to do. And when we did that, we actually found local kind of talent that was able to help do those things without really even needing money. So it might be the case where if you have a partner like GICM or a trusted friend of, be it Jeff with his solar specific background, they can kind of help shed more light and illuminate the problem in a new way to say, oh, okay, well, yeah, we actually have a local farmer who would be able to help, volunteer, and because he sees both the vision of where this is going and that it's going to be a sustainable project. Pia, I think we had that story of New York where a church was raised all this money to do a restoration for all the artwork inside of it, and after raising all this money and doing all these things, the church, the diocese decided to close the church. And so the parishioners were very upset of saying, well, we just raised all this money to restore this beautiful church, and you knew it was going to close the whole time. Like, why didn't you tell us that before we put all this money in, and now it's going to be sold? So I think that in the same way, if be it farming or be it a more sophisticated solar energy project or adaptive reuse, having a good sustainable vision of what the need is and what you're hoping to do with that real estate would go a very long way, and it could lead to finding unique partnerships for money, to actually providing through Catholic Relief Services or a grant or a foundation, but also those people are more willing to help out if they know, well, what is the vision? Is it farming is very vague? Is it coffee? Is it what type? And those structures are critically important.
And sorry if I jump in as well. There is also another thing to, like, we are speaking about partnership, to save places or to restore places. In France, there is this nice initiative that is called Adopt un Château, Adopt a Castle, and it is spreading to religious monuments as well. So sometimes you can have 100 owners, you can buy shares of the building, and then you can use for different purposes, but it maintains its religious purpose. And so you can have 100 owners, and it protects it from the state or from other people. And it's a way to finance as well these kind of places. You can have this kind of collective project. And I believe it is also a solution that can be extremely interesting for the future. So it started a few years ago in France, and it's spreading slowly to religious places, to monasteries and all. And I believe we can extend that to new projects as well, even new buildings, and like co-ownership and collective projects like that. I believe it's very interesting, and we can discuss that for the future as well.
Yeah, I think one of our future webinars is going to have to be on creative financing. We've got these first 4 mapped out. I think that might be possibly in January, we're going to focus on creative financing, because I think that's the biggest need. I want to turn to some of the questions because we're getting a lot. And Jeff, there are a couple for you. This is one that I think is really sensitive. So and I'm going to botch the pronunciation, the Uyghur region, I've heard it pronounced so many different ways. Anyway, region of China produces almost half of the world's solar grade polysilicon, a key component of all solar panels, all through forced labor programs. So what steps do you take at Mission Energy to avoid those forced labor panels? To get things that are responsibly produced?
As we serve, the Catholic community, this has been brought up by several of our clients, and it's absolutely critical for us to simply avoid these panels that are made from the Uyghur forced labor. I might pronounce it wrong. I've heard about
5 different pronunciations, so I'll take whatever you give.
Sure. So you know, the simple piece is we're telling our suppliers of panels that, you know, we will not accept panels that are built using forced labor. However, you know, to be honest, it's a lot of the manufacturers don't know yet if the polysilicon, the raw materials for these panels came from these forced labor camps. So it's evolving right now, and we're trying to adapt as quickly as possible to respond. And you know, with
so you're
our
having to
market
educate
signal,
them. You're having to educate them to the situation, right?
yes, yep, and especially with our community, you know, that's faith-based. This is really important to us, and so we're trying to send that market signal back to our suppliers that yes, this matters, and you need to know. And if you don't know, we'll look for another manufacturer. And we're seeing a lot of the communities also bring this up too. And to also touch on another question around panel recycling. It's interesting, these solar panels last for 30, 40 years. So they're very long lasting assets here. So, you know, many of our contracts really have a term in the end saying that they will be recycled in a manner that's appropriate at the time, to try to make sure we're good stewards of the resources, not only as they're producing solar, but then after as well. And you know, 30 or 40 years is a long time. We really expect that recycling and the ability to reuse a majority of the materials from these panels will have dramatically increased.
So I mean, it sounds like it's a question of the technology catching up with it, because I mean, Apple has been under fire for a long time. That nothing is, not nothing, but a lot of their materials are not recyclable. There's the gentleman who used to be with Tesla, who's created a huge company in the Bay Area that is just focused on recycling batteries, because all these batteries are out there. We say they're recyclable, but yet the technology hasn't caught up with the promise.
Yep, correct. And you know, with all of these projects, I mean, there's even more than just materials. Look at labor, for example, and you know, we try to use union labor where available. You know, are paying fair wages. It's important throughout all these projects to really take in Catholic social teaching and apply it to the business aspect of what we do.
Great, thanks, Jeff. There's a question here, and unless one of you wants to take it, I can take it. This is from Father Andrew Hassan Kamara. He's actually a student of PCM in Rome. And he says, in my own case, he says, most times church assets are difficult to differentiate from what the pastor owns, simply because they are poor and not taken care of. Therefore, most of them have to survive from what is supposed to be purely church assets and property. Lack of transparency enters here in terms of revenue generation. And this is a very difficult situation. And what we teach at the program of church management is, if you begin to implement some standards of transparency, accountability, and governance, and you begin to set up, I mean, and one key thing here too is setting up a priest pension fund. A lot of priests, if there isn't a clear salary and there isn't a clear pension, then they're trying to figure out, how do I get paid out of the assets of the church? And how do we keep these lines clear? And the reason that's important is because, again, when you're looking at any revenue that's coming into the church, whose is it? Is it the pastors? Is it the parishes? To whom does it belong? If you're looking for assets to invest in a project, is a parish able to say, Father, you need to pick up some money for this? And so I would say that really that's answered with good governance and finding a way to come up with a salary for a priest, no matter how difficult, but really some clear lines. And the pension funds we've seen have been a huge help in helping to clarify the lines, because then the priests know, well, okay, I'm going to be taken care of. There's a plan in place. But this all comes back to what we teach at the program of church management: transparency and accountability, overlaid with good governance overlaid. That's how we keep these markers clear. And I think if you don't do that, it's very hard to get it's very challenging to get the confidence of your parishioners to invest if the lines are not clear. And we've done a few webinars on this in the past, where if people know exactly where the money is going to, and they can see it, there's the accountability for it, they are much more willing to give. We had a pastor in Seattle who I can't recall if it was every quarter or every month. He would just, in the bulletin, he put a page that was printed out, and you saw all of the expenditures of the church. It was just a profit and loss statement, what came in, what went out. And as a result, this is a blue collar parish. He was able to raise millions of dollars to renovate the church, renovate the school, and in speaking of transforming church properties, to take an old convent and turn it into a space for retreats, so that you didn't have to drive hours and pay hundreds of dollars to go to retreat. You could go to your local parish for a retreat for $50, and if you couldn't pay, the parish covers it, So, but I think, to answer Father Andrew's question, it's really important, transparency, accountability, and over that, governance. And we have to be realistic about, the priest has to be able to make a certain amount. And if you have a parish, for example, maybe in diocese where there's a parish that is more affluent, maybe that parish helps to the parishes that are less affluent. But it's, at the end of the day, I would say, a governance issue. Then, Jeff, we have a couple more questions for you. Basically, these are all questions of, here we have, how can we implement a green energy program in an Orthodox monastery in Romania? What would be the means of financing the project? A similar question from Sierra Leone. Again, even though you're US centric, could you give some direction?
Happy to. I think, number one, I'll repeat my answer just straight from the financing side. It's finding the right partners, maybe a local bank, a community bank, a business, to look for partners to finance it. I think the number two area you need to look at is just the regulatory environment. What are the regulations in your country, in your state, in your city around renewable energy? It can be quite complicated to figure out. Number two, just the regulations with utilities in your particular area, and do they even allow you to put a solar array and produce your own power? Looking at partnerships, there are firms out there that install solar, across the country and in your local area. Possibly reaching out to them. They have an incentive to help you find financing and navigate the regulatory environment. Yeah, from Sierra Leone to Romania, they're just very different contexts. So, looking for a local partner, a local solar developer, maybe a parishioner that's involved. And I'd be happy to maybe do a little research on my own and provide a little feedback if I can as well.
And again, these are opportunities, because it's not just asking one of these providers to do something for free. It's an investment. There's a revenue sharing opportunity here, both for the institution that's looking for the help and for the institution the business that provides the energy, the solar, and that enables the solar energy. So it's not charity. That's what I like about this theme, is that we're not looking for charity. We're using the church's assets really to generate revenue, so that we have more money to put into the services of the church.
Yes, and these projects help meet some of the UN Millennium Development Goals. So there might be organizations that could help fund projects that meet some of the UN goals as well. So that could be a potential source of funding on a global scale.
Great. Solène, can I just ask you, you mentioned a little bit of financing, but some of the Cistercian Abbey, you mentioned that's a very expensive project. Are you familiar with the funding and how they were able to come together with the funding to undertake this endeavor?
You mean the Boulor Abbey in southern France?
The one with the religious sisters.
Yes. So yeah,
okay.
Basically, so they told me that they received a lot of help from the US. Actually, I don't know all about it, but I know that they have been receiving a lot of financial support from across the world, because they did a crowdfunding. They launched a platform online, and people participated in it. And I know they had some private donations, but they didn't tell me about it. But they told me that they received a lot of different private donations. Of course, they didn't rely on the state for that. So once again, it is through this crowdfunding platform. So it's like Jeff said a few minutes ago, it's extremely interesting. When you have a solid project, you can count on people's support. You know, when people believe in what you're doing, I really believe in this kind of platforms. It's incredibly helpful. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that with our students. So as I mentioned, they have to do a capstone project, which means we try and make everything as practical as possible. This is about hard skills. And so the capstone project is something that their ecclesiastical superior signs off on. And at the same time, the student has to demonstrate that they have, that they're able to apply what they've learned. And what we're seeing is that people are excited. I mean, they're looking for an opportunity to participate. And we have one priest from the Netherlands who actually created a pop-up church to go out into the squares and so forth, and to make the church present, because nobody's going to church. So he's taking the church to the people. And what's fascinating is that he's being welcomed by young families, and people are very generous with designated funds. They have, if they see a concrete project in mind that is clear and well thought out, they are generous. And this has been a consistent experience, that it's not a question of not having the money. It's a question of being creative enough to present it in a way that people see it as an opportunity, not just for the church, but also for themselves and for the broader community, and to have that bigger impact. And I think it's requiring us to think a little bit more than we have in the past. I don't know, David, would you like to jump in on this?
Yeah, it's it's just a fantastic opportunity when we look at, and I kind of want to take this opportunity to maybe tweak it a little bit of just when we look at these examples, and I just shared them in the link of Solène's 2 articles on kind of this rising tide economic opportunity. So like when we look at the church and these kind of, again, I go back to Ever Ancient, Ever New of these, it's a 12th century Cistercian monastery that is kind of being revived. But what Solène teases out in that is that it's engagement with the local community. So just like this priest who's doing these pop-up churches, it's drawing people in more than just in a spiritual dimension. So oftentimes it's, I love to think about how we can switch from a consumer Catholic to a consumed Catholic. So if a consumer Catholic is just going into Mass just once an hour once a week, how do we switch that around to say that it's the church is the kind of the center and the focal point of their life? And what I love about this example in France, or both examples in France, is how both the nuns and the monks engage with the local community, and it's kind of a rising tide to attract people in economically, culturally, but spiritually too, in that sense. Like you can't encounter a nun and not, like recognize that this is a woman of God. And so I love, I haven't heard of that pop-up example, the pop-up church example, Pia. So I think that's pretty interesting. But instead of a pop-up church in France, it's this monastery that's been there for 800 years. Yeah. And they're breathing new life into it in a way that resembles kind of the nuances of today's realities. So there's an agricultural school that they reached out to and said, hey, you can use our land. They have 100 and something acres. And there's engagement there. So even if you're not Catholic and you're part of the school and you're in this rural, poor region, you're able to kind of have access to resources and opportunities to kind of pull you up. And when you look at it at the engine, it's Christ. It's a monastery, it's a convent, it's nuns who are living kind of their vocation out in a very unique way. And again, this gets back to real estate and just kind of reimagining, hey, we've had this asset for a long, long time. It's a huge liability. And there are the challenges of raising money, of kind of telling that story. But at the heart of it, it's not just another, it's not an Amazon fulfillment center. It's these nuns who are alive and vibrant. And I lifted both of those articles in the chat, and you can read, and Solène talks about that they're young, they're vibrant. I think, Solène, I think the average age is 45, and they have a lot of young postulants who are joining. So
yeah,
so it's very beautiful dynamic to see. Yeah.
And sorry, I just got distracted here. There's just so many exciting things. I guess part of what initiated my passion for this topic was I used to work for the Augustine Institute. And so, they were big on developing really great content. And there's just such a positive aspect. And then I began to become more attuned to the stories of churches closing. And I thought, wow, we spent a lot of time figuring out how to close churches. What if we spent as much time figuring out how to get people into the churches, and then and also maybe in some cases reappropriate the church? I mean, maybe you do have a situation where there's 3 churches in 3 blocks that aren't being used, but there's got to be a way to be creative to use that property instead of to find it, I don't know, God forbid, turned into a strip joint or something just so far off from church mission. It just is a kind of a final question, quick ideas from any of the panelists on how we rescue rescue churches from this, from misuse or being repurposed for something that's completely off mission.
I think right away it comes to mind is if the church does have to sell, in our December series, we'll have a great talk on kind of legal legacies, but kind of in the short term, I think there's just tapping into a spirit of creativity and innovation. There's a great story of an urban parish that was struggling with, had several different issues, and one of them was just it was just kind of sleepy. Like, it wasn't really, people weren't engaged, and there was a large Latino immigrant community that was around this parish, and the pastor realized that the moms specifically of these immigrants, they none of them had laundry. So they would go to the laundromat and they would spend a long time there doing the laundry for the family. And it was in a not safe part of town. And he found out that the gangs would recruit outside of the laundromat because all the children would get bored in the, watching the laundry, and they'd go outside. And so he went out and bought a bunch of washers and dryers and put them in the parish hall, and said, hey, it's just pay whatever you think is fair or it's free. And so he made that an investment, used his parish hall, again, kind of a real estate play, but all of a sudden the moms were like, oh my gosh, we don't want our kids around the gang. So they started doing their laundry there, it was free. And he overlaid Bible studies during the laundry kind of rush hour. And then he had supervised playground time for the kids, so they could go out and play, and there was no threat of gang recruitment or violence. And it just totally transformed the church. He didn't do anything different. It just kind of reminding people, kind of to your point earlier, Pia, that there's a church here, and that it can be, again, the kind of the hub, not only the spiritual element, but the cultural, economic fabric of everyday life, and kind of putting the church back in the kind of the center of the church square, so to speak. And so it could be something simple as that, all the way up to an advanced restructuring deal or kind of these solar projects or building projects. And so I think it just kind of starts with kind of a creative idea, almost a needs assessment, an inventory of, well, what are the problems, and how can my current real estate or current property or current assets meet those? And can I think of it in a new way other than, well, it's just a parish hall, we have bingo and we have dances or something here, but no one really ever thinks about it as a laundromat. And so it takes some creativity and imagination, I think, on that end. And some of the other maybe more sophisticated fundraising things will maybe come from that, but it can be something transformative just on the lowest basic level.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we've learned, over the past 20 plus years. Micro lending, it's this tiny amount of money that's used very creatively, and it's able to grow a great deal of revenue and have a tremendous impact. So anyway, I want to thank you all for joining. I'm very happy, Jeff, Solène, David, that you could join us. I want to encourage you all in your work. David will be joining us more with the next few, he'll be helping out with the next few webinars as well. And I want to remind everyone that our next webinar is October 14th. We'll be focusing on the needs of rural church real estate. And we also, keep it on your calendar, we hope to be able to confirm our conference in Rome for February 7th through 8th, if I'm correct. Right, David? Yes. So,
yes.
All right. So lots coming down the pike this year. And again, thanks for joining us. We look forward to seeing you for the next webinar. And as always, if you have questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to us at our website at gicm.org. Thank you so much.